I'm on a journey of making a new glasses case. The whole thing started because I couldn't find a case that felt right for my old glasses, the ones I've worn for years, so I decided to make one myself. At first, I had no idea where to begin. I started sketching on paper, looking at old envelope pouch I had, and using microfiber scraps to test out shapes. It wasn't until I made the first version of the side part that things started to click. In the last episode, I made an improved version. It might not look dramatically different, but the process, the thinking behind it, changed a lot. Using that new one, I also put together the first version of the back body and figured out how everything connects. In today's episode, I'll go deeper into the making process. I'll stitch it onto the back body using a sewing machine. Hope it's helpful and let's get started. This time I made the side part more structured, just added one extra line of stitching. These two pieces will be used later. To clean up the back, I used a 0.5mm thick piece of matching leather to cover the cut edge. That piece also helps support the threads from underneath, so the ends sit more neatly. The flap on top, I didn't glue it down. I wanted to keep some natural flexibility between the layers. I'll sew straight through the cover layer first, then shape it properly afterwards. Before actually sewing, I switched the thread that matched the leather. First, I used to test my sample to double check the position of the guide. It gives me about 8mm of the seam width. Then I used a needle to mimic the sewing motion, just to make sure the holes lined up. The screws on the guide had to be tightened. I sew the first stitch by hand, so it doesn't shift. I also hold down both thread ends, so they don't get pulled in. Then I backstitch one stitch to lock everything in place. After that, it gets a lot easier. At the end, I backstitch again. For the same reason, lock the thread ends, and that's it. When using the nylon thread, I leave a little extra. Don't trim them flush. That's because I'll melt them with the leather and press them down onto the leather. For shaping, I bring out the hammer. First, I pinch and squeeze the edges with my fingers, just to imagine how the final shape might look. Two small tips here. One, make sure the hammer is polished. If it's not, it'll leave marks. Two, always place a piece of leather underneath, so the hard surface doesn't damage your work. The point of hammering is to soften the leather, which helps the thread ends settle better. Honestly, making something by hand takes a lot of physical work. While shaping, I also use a nail to press the threads back in. Leather remembers things. Whatever you press into it, it keeps. Here's the front after it's done. The 3D shape really stands out. The small piece of leather not only covers the cut edge, but also gives some support from behind. Two birds with one stone. This is the main body of the bag. I'll glue the two side pieces on, lining them up with the notches from here to here. Before sewing, I need to prepare the top edge of the bag. My method is to stick down some tape to protect the area and mark the fold line. It keeps things clean and works as a guide. I added some thinner to the glue so it spreads more easily, but only applied it along the edges, not in the middle. That way, the folded edge won't look too stiff. Usually, I do 2 coats. Let the first one dry before brushing on the second. Here's how it looks when it's down. I leave the ends unglued for now, since I'll deal with those later. Now you can probably see why the tape helps. It really guides the fold. Whether the fold goes smoothly depends a lot on how well the leather's been skived. If it's done right, the fold becomes super easy. To finish it off, I tap it down with a hammer. And yes, always use a polished one. Once everything's set, I peeled off the tape, folding it down. The part without glue in the middle, that's what gave it a more natural, springy feel. Now you can see why I didn't glue the ends. It's because I need to line them up with the notches when attaching the side parts. If the notch positions are off, the whole bag's going to be a mess. If you are curious how to find matching notches, check out the last episode. Alright, time to start stitching things together. This time I'm using a sewing machine model 69. This is the one I use most when making structure bags. Before I start, I test stitch on some scrap leather to check the stitch length. Gotta make sure it matches the final piece. I gotta say, I feel pretty confident this time. First, the notches lined up. Second, I've got a guide on the machine. Didn't even need glue. Just clip it in place and stitched. Drop the needle in, clean up the loose thread. Same old routine. Backstitch to start. This curve wasn't too sharp, so the stitching went pretty smoothly. Here the front. You can already get a sense of how the structure's coming together. Alright, let's keep going. I was just hitting the curve and feeling on the top of the world. But no, the notches didn't line up. Everything was fine before. So what happened? Bad design? Or did I trust life too soon? No, stop right here. Don't let this mess get any worse. I took the stitches out and started over. Right after the first stitch, I knew it. The body size bigger than the side parts. Maybe I planned that for extra room? Or maybe the universe just threw it in for fun. I adjusted my grip, told myself, we've got this. Then I hit the corner. And no way to stitch that shut. The leather was basically telling me, you want to sew me? Who do you think you are? So what now? Am I really about to give in to glue? Alright, if it the hard way won't work, I'm going soft, gluing first, then sewing. Once glued, the bag stood up like it was mocking my earlier naive. So I flipped it, turned it over. Then luckily, the guide on the machines got me back. The stitch length is at least relatively consistent. And blend stitched it. That is part art, part danger. No matter how small the machine is, physics won't bend. When I got to the corner, the leather went wild, like a runaway horse. Every stitch on the machine seemed to ask me, you sure about this? I pulled the leather tight and stitched, moving like I was playing a game. At this point, all I could tell myself was, don't overthink it, just stick it down and move on. Snap! Glue popped. The room fell completely silent. I just sat there, staring, asking myself, what did I screw up this time? I was already trying to make it work, but it still wouldn't cooperate. That moment, when all your hard work feels like a betrayal, is pure heartbreak. I took it apart and inspected it. The position shifted. The notches lined up, but the logic didn't. Flip it over, and what a surprise! The piping on the corner almost disappeared, swallowed by the leather. Oh my god! I should have added a core in there. Maybe the leather just wanted freedom instead of support. The leather is too thick, the space too tight, and the machine's foot is too fly. Everything was just wrong. Suddenly I get that old saying, every piece of leather had its own personality. Today it's told me you gotta start over. Alright, that's enough for today. Maybe this isn't failure. Maybe the bag is just ready to be finished. Sometimes it's not me shaping the leather, it's the leather shaping me. See you next time.